My mother-in-law sent my husband explicit OnlyFans pictures and asked him to share them with his coworkers to help boost her numbers. She even said, "Don't tell them I'm your mom." We're now cutting contact with her, but the family keeps reaching out asking what's going on. My mother-in-law, 40F, has always been extremely open when it comes to talking about sex. When I first met my husband, she was managing a sex toy shop. About a year ago, she began pursuing a degree in sexual health and wellness. She also occasionally poses nude for a local artist and, more recently, launched an OnlyFans account. For her, being open about sexuality has always been completely normal. I genuinely don't have any issue with her career in the sex industry. It's clearly something she's passionate about, and I'm glad she's doing what she enjoys. My concern isn't with her profession or general openness, it's more about how much she shares, particularly with her own children. For example, when my husband and I were dating in high school and she was still managing the shop, she would sometimes come home and casually drop by his room to hand us sample packets of lube or sensation gels, saying things like, "Thought you two might want to try these." It made both of us really uncomfortable. It was awkward and inappropriate to be handed sexual products by my boyfriend's mom, and while we talked about how weird it was, that was as far as the conversation went. Needless to say, we never used any of it, the samples just sat untouched on a shelf. Another time, while we were dating, fresh out of high school, we were hanging out with his sisters. His mom was still working at the sex toy shop. Once in a while, she would come home with silly toys, and on this night, she walked in with a 1-foot-long glittery dildo. She playfully whipped it around towards us like a sword, his sisters screamed and ran from her, and for a while we all laughed and had fun about it. Snatching it from one another and chasing each other around with the glitter schlag. Eventually, my husband's sister, 17 at the time, said something like, "Mom, you better not have brought that home to use. That's crazy." My husband chimed off an ew, saying he didn't need to think about that. And his mom laughed and replied, "Oh no, that's silicone. You know the toys I use are glass." Again, my husband made a weird face, but didn't say anything. When we got to his room, I said that it was weird that his mom talked to her children about what she uses to get her rocks off, and he told me that she's always been way too open about things that none of them wanted to know, but that she's always been this way, so he's just gotten used to tuning it out. As time went on, I got used to the openness. And it was just that, being too open about personal stuff within conversation. However, yesterday the openness went too far. My husband and I were in the living room watching TV when he got a text from his mom. As soon as he opened it, his reaction was immediate and intense. He threw his phone down, stood up, and walked away with his hands over his face, muttering, "Oh my God," and "Holy shit." Naturally, I panicked, thinking something terrible had happened. I kept asking what was wrong, and all he could say was that he didn't even want to look at his phone again. When I pressed him further, he finally admitted that his mom had sent him some pictures. I didn't understand what he meant at first, but then he said something that made my stomach drop. "I don't want to ask you to look, but I can't open it again to delete it myself, so I need you to." Hesitantly, I opened his phone and immediately felt sick. The message from his mom said, "Hey, I know you've always supported me, and I was wondering if you'd consider subscribing to my OnlyFans to help boost my numbers while I'm getting started. Of course, I don't expect or want you to look at anything, but the more subscribers I have, the better. Also, would you be willing to share my link with some of your coworkers? He works in a male-dominated, blue-collar field. I've included a few pics to send them, but please don't tell them I'm your mom." Attached were 3 explicit nude photos of his mother, not mild or suggestive, but full-on graphic. One was of her tied in BDSM gear, another was of her posed provocatively on her bed, and the third showed her with a dildo halfway in her mouth. I was furious. I deleted the message immediately. My husband and I sat there in silence until I finally asked, "What now?" He told me to block her number, so I did. I asked if she had ever done anything like this before. He said no, though in the past she'd offered to show him sketches she'd posed for, which he always ignored without responding, and she'd never pushed it. But now, this was something entirely different. He turned pale and had to go to the bathroom because he felt sick. While he was in there, I blocked her on my phone and on social media. When he came back, he called his sister. He asked if she was with their mom, she wasn't, and then explained everything. She was stunned into silence. He told her not to mention it to the rest of the family yet, and that he and I would be cutting contact with their mother for the foreseeable future. He also said that when we visit, we'll let her and their siblings know ahead of time so they can still see us, but their mom will not be included in those plans. It didn't take long for my MIL to realize she'd been blocked. By that evening, our phones were flooded with messages from family members wanting to know what was going on. The messages haven't stopped since, but we've muted our phones because, how exactly do you explain that your own mother sent you explicit content of herself? Update. Since many people asked for an update, here's a brief one for now. When my husband got home from work today, he asked me to recover the deleted messages for documentation, in case we need them later. I took screenshots of the text, including timestamps, as well as the attached photos. For privacy, I edited the photos by scribbling over her exposed areas. After that, I transferred everything to my phone and deleted the messages from both his and my devices again just as he requested. A lot of people had suggested doing this, and truthfully, we were already planning to before I even read those comments. My husband and I have been attending therapy regularly, both individual sessions and couples counseling. It was a mutual decision we made early in our marriage, not because of issues, but because we wanted to maintain strong communication and stay aligned in our relationship. I asked him if he had ever brought up his mother's hypersexual behavior in his personal therapy, and he admitted he hadn't. Since this kind of behavior was normalized in his upbringing, he never saw it as particularly unusual. I encouraged him to bring it up in his next session, and he agreed. I also asked him if there were any past experiences that stood out as especially inappropriate. He shared that his mom used to come home from work with new lingerie and would wear it around the house like everyday clothing. It made him very uncomfortable, so he would either stay in his room or go to a friend's house whenever that happened. A lot of people have asked why there hasn't been a direct conversation with her about the uncomfortable topics she brings up. There actually has been. Back when we were both still minors and dating, she would ask him explicit questions about our sex life. She'd ask things like whether he preferred girls who were shaved, whether we used lube, if we liked ribbed condoms, if we'd tried certain positions, and even whether I preferred clitoral or G-spot stimulation. My husband usually gave vague replies like "I don't know," but eventually he did confront her. He told her that those kinds of questions made him very uncomfortable and that he didn't want to discuss our sex life with her, especially since I wouldn't be okay with it either. Her response was defensive. She acted like he had insulted her, saying that sex is normal and she should be allowed to talk about it with her own son. She even accused him of trying to shame her sexuality. After that, he just started ignoring her questions altogether. Some suggested that we have an in-person conversation with her about this happening. Not only do we live far away, but we aren't ready for a conversation about it, and we especially aren't ready to discuss it in person. This happened yesterday afternoon. And it will honestly be a very long time before any sort of communication happens with her at all. I did find out what she'd been telling family. She's telling them that she asked if her son supported her. Not if he would subscribe and share her content. That is why family has been reaching out and asking why we've blocked her for asking that. We will be telling family exactly what happened, but we aren't quite ready to do so yet, and that will come within the next few days. We're still processing all of what's going on. My husband has a therapy appointment scheduled for tomorrow, and we have a couples session the following day. We're planning to hold off on discussing anything with the rest of the family until after those sessions. We want to take time to process everything and organize our next steps. We're also exploring the possibility of legal action, though that's something we intend to discuss with our therapists before moving forward. That's one of the main reasons we took screenshots and saved the evidence. For those asking, yes, my MIL is quite young. She had my husband when she was around 16 or 17, and we also married young, which is pretty typical in both my family and the career field he's in. My husband serves in the military, which makes this situation even more serious. If he were to share his mother's explicit content even unintentionally, it could lead to severe consequences. Beyond just losing his job, it could open a sharp, sexual harassment/assault response and prevention, investigation, and possibly result in a dishonorable discharge. That would make continuing life after the military incredibly difficult. That's all we have to share for now, but we do plan to provide another update later. I really appreciate all the thoughtful advice and support from the last post. So many of your comments were incredibly helpful and gave us a lot to consider. Update. After discussing everything thoroughly with our therapists, my husband and I have come to a decision on how we'll move forward. Following our therapist's guidance and our own conversations, we've decided to cut off contact with my MIL until she's willing to do the necessary personal work and stops behaving in an overly sexual manner around family. Realistically, we're prepared for that cutoff to be permanent, especially since she doesn't value therapy. She's expressed the belief that therapists only point out flaws and make things worse, rather than actually supporting mental health. It's clear she's had negative experiences or perceptions that have led her to that view. For now, we've chosen not to pursue legal action. We'd rather first set clear boundaries about what behavior we will and won't accept. If she respects those boundaries, we'll leave it at that. However, if she disregards them by trying to contact us through new accounts or other means, we'll likely seek a restraining order. As mentioned in a previous update, we've kept the screenshot evidence in case it's needed. Regarding the rest of the family, after MIL was blocked, many of them began contacting us, confused and concerned. MIL had told them we blocked her simply because she asked for support in her endeavors. What she left out, of course, was that she also sent explicit images. We explained what really happened without sharing the images, but giving a clear description. The response from family was immediate understanding, and the issue wasn't pushed any further. Whether or not they've confronted MIL themselves, we're not sure. If they did, great, she needs to be held accountable. If not, so be it. Now, from my own perspective. I was raised in a family where everything was very taboo. Sex, sexuality, our bodies, even our periods were difficult to talk about. So much so, that when my mom found out I had a crush on a boy when I was 13, I cried and profusely apologized because I thought I would be in a lot of trouble. Asking questions wasn't okay either, so when I did have questions, I couldn't simply ask. For example, I overheard my mom say the word porn and didn't know what it meant. When I asked my parents what the word porn was, and I got sent to my room. So, at 7 years old, I grabbed the family tablet and Googled porn. Saw a bunch of naked people, got scared, put the iPad back in the living room. When my parents checked the search history that night, I was screamed at and not allowed to touch electronics for the rest of the year. With all of that in mind, a sex-positive family was so incredibly foreign to me. The idea of being able to go to your mom, ask about sex or your body, and have a conversation instead of getting in trouble, was completely new. When my husband and I were dating, I never knew that his mom was going too far. I thought that this simply was sex positivity. Of course, I had intuition that things went too far at times, like when I questioned the toy conversation, but when the response to my questions were, "She's just really open," I chalked it up to that and didn't really question it anymore. To address some frequently asked questions. My MIL hasn't acted this inappropriately with my sisters-in-law, SILs. I originally assumed it was because they were younger, but realizing she only sent those explicit photos to my husband solidified our concerns about covert incest. We've also learned that while she's quite open about her own sexuality, she doesn't pry into the SIL's personal lives the way she did with my husband. I previously mentioned how she used to question him about our sex life when we were teenagers, something that never happened with the girls. In fact, during a recent phone call, one SIL told us that if they ever mentioned anything remotely intimate about their boyfriends, MIL would shut it down, saying things like, "Ugh. Keep your voice down, I don't want to know." In contrast, she asked my husband direct and inappropriate questions. Another question that's come up, where is FIL? My husband's father left while MIL was pregnant with her youngest daughter and has never been involved. Similarly, MIL's own father abandoned her as a baby. There are very few men in the family, just 2 distant uncles and a few cousins. My husband grew up as the only close male relative, and to make matters worse, he's nearly identical to his biological father in appearance, same build, hair, bone structure, even a similar birthmark, which adds another unsettling layer to the situation. And no, we don't have children yet. But I've always had serious concerns about the idea of leaving any future children alone with her due to her lack of boundaries. When the time comes, my husband and I will decide when and how to introduce sensitive topics to our kids, not her. I've worried she wouldn't respect our decisions and might take it upon herself to discuss things like sex education prematurely. Unless she truly changes, she will never be alone with our children and possibly won't even be involved in their lives at all. This will be my final update regarding the situation. The original post was removed from the subreddit, but I've reposted it on my personal page for anyone who wants to read it. I'll stay active here to answer any further questions, so feel free to ask. Thank you all again for your advice and support. Before all this, I hadn't even heard the term covert incest, and learning about it has really helped us make sense of the past. It's become something my husband and I are actively researching, and it's given us new perspective. He'll continue to explore it in his personal therapy sessions, and I'll be bringing it up in mine as well. It will definitely be a recurring topic in our couples counseling, too. Again, thank you so much. Relevant top comments. Clarification from OOP about potential consequences for her husband in the military. Let me clarify, I'm not in the military, my husband is. I never said he'd get in trouble just because his mother sent him those photos. What I said was that if he had shared them with coworkers, he could have faced serious consequences. In a previous comment, someone suggested he couldn't be in trouble since he didn't actually share them, which is true. But the key point is that his mother specifically asked him to send those images to his coworkers, knowing full well that doing so could get him into trouble. That's the issue I was highlighting. She actively encouraged him to do something that could jeopardize his military career. Regarding sharp, sexual harassment/assault response and prevention, violations, yes, if he had shared those images, that could have resulted in a sharp case. From what I've seen in our community, these are taken very seriously. People have even been dishonorably discharged over them. Again, I'm not in the military myself, but that's what I understand from what I've witnessed. Also, if you think this is just karma farming, that's your choice. But, as I mentioned in the original post, this is a throwaway account, which I plan to delete or leave inactive. Farming karma on an account I'm not keeping wouldn't make much sense. To be extra clear, no, my husband will not get in trouble simply for receiving the images. The concern was what could have happened if he had done what his mother asked and shared them. He didn't. But the fact that she pushed him to do something so reckless and damaging is a serious problem.